Okay, so some of you have been asking about uh, the best way to start building a contoured site model, uh, like a physical site model out of sheet material like chipboard, foam board, even MDF or something like that on the CNC router. Um, so the first thing I would say is it's always best to start with a solid poly surface. So if you look over here under properties, the type that's listed is a closed solid poly surface, or some variation of that. This makes it much easier to perform uh, any Boolean operation. It allows you to perform a Boolean operation, really. And in this case, I think it streamlines the process. So I have here this model. It does have a few additional objects that are embedded in the site. So we can get back to that in a second. But once you have your site, the command that we use is called contour. So I'll type that in, and then it asks us to select the objects. I'll select everything, and then a base point. So this will typically be the bottom of the model, and it's asking for a direction perpendicular to the contour plane. So if we're cutting horizontal planes, we want the direction to be vertical. So my second point will be at the top of the model. And then finally, it asks for a distance between each contour. So I'll do 2 feet. And then there is our series of contours. A few things that are nice about this actually becomes a really effective way to describe a sloped or curved surface within the model for orthographic projections, plans, sections, that sort of thing. So becomes a useful tool. I used a 2-foot increment. You could obviously adjust that if you wanted a denser line. So it is a great aid in producing drawings. But for our purposes, our goal is to have closed curves for using on a cutting tool like the laser or the Zund digital cutter, something like that. So if we select one of these lines, one of these contours, I'm going to select one where it intersects with one of these objects. And you'll notice that it contoured both of them, but they are not joined, they're not unioned, right? They're 2 separate elements. And maybe that's what you want. But if our goal is to produce a monolithic site model, that would be a problem. So what you first would want to do is ensure that everything is joined, rather not joined, is unioned. So I'll go ahead and key in Boolean union, and then select all the objects again. And it turned on the ISO curves, so I'll just go ahead and just turn those back off. So I'll select the object, and under properties down here at the bottom, it says show surface ISO curves. I'll deselect that. So in this case, it just gives us a better reading of the final model. And so the best way to look at this is through wireframe, right? We can see that there's not kind of intersecting objects any longer. It's all just a series of surfaces, right, that produce closed solid poly surface. So now that we have this, now I'm going to go ahead and contour one more time. All right, same parameters. Now this time when I select a contour that intersects with these other elements, right, everything is contiguous, and that's really important. So you could see how you could easily go about manually pulling out each of these closed curves and laying them out on a sheet for one of the fabrication tools, or even to print a template to cut by hand. So one last thing I wanted to do, actually, I didn't do go ahead and run it one more time. Once you have the contours, you could, from that point, once you have them selected, extrude curve. And we're not going to deal with this, but if we extrude them in the negative direction 2 feet, you could end up with a stepped contour digital model. So you may not want to do that, but it's also a helpful way to visualize what the physical model might end up looking like. So it's a little hard to read right now because the steps moved into the smooth surface. So if I select the original smooth surface and hide it, it will reveal the steps. And as I say, this is a good way to kind of simulate the finished product that you would get with a series of stepped elements, right? Just keep in mind that in this case, if they're 2-foot increments, the scale matters. So you want to match up your material thickness to the step and the scale of the model, right? Otherwise, you're going to end up with a slope that's not really close or accurate. So it can be deceiving. But as you can see, there is your stepped contour model, right? And you could select these individual things. I don't know if this is so useful for a cutting operation, but it is interesting to see, right? So there you have it. One approach for setting up a stepped contour model.